of 2017, the Mayor's Office of LGBT Affairs for the City of Philadelphia introduced the More Color, More Pride flag to our community. A simple symbol to acknowledge the reality of racism in the LGBTQ community and stand in solidarity with LGBTQ people of color whose stories, experiences, and realities have been silenced, whitewashed, and erased from our larger narratives. While intended to be a local initiative to address local issues, this flag quickly became a national and international symbol on the importance of intersectionality. While the flag is a dynamic symbol, and I would be the last person to argue that, we are all being called to move beyond mere symbolism and into real substantive change to support marginalized people among us. This is essential for the success and the future of our LGBTQ community. Often when I speak with people about diversity and inclusion and intersectionality, they are well-meaning and well-intentioned, eager to tell me what their companies and organizations and community groups have done to foster more inclusive environments. But in these challenging times, many of us are seeking to do more. And I argue that that dedication is what is required of us. We must commit ourselves to being what I call political in place and standing as allies to one another. So for those of you who are looking for more powerful ways to show up, to speak up, and to stand up, I'm going to offer you some tools for intersectional allyship. We must begin by acknowledging our privilege. Each one of us possesses privilege. Even as a queer Black woman, I possess privilege in this world. And so I call on you to weaponize your privilege in service to those who are more marginalized. Because it is not the responsibility of people of color to fight racism, nor is it the responsibility of women to combat sexism and misogyny. The onus is not on trans people to fight transphobia, and it is certainly not on people living with disabilities to combat ableism. It is your responsibility, and my responsibility, and our collective responsibility. We must act as allies to our siblings. So here are 3 ways where you can weaponize your own privilege and proactively create more inclusive intersectional environments by interrogating your surroundings, signal boosting, and calling in. 1. One of the many benefits and frankly consequences of privilege is often being surrounded by people who look like you, think like you, and whose experiences mirror your own. I challenge each and every one of you to move forward interrogating these surroundings. Examine who's at the table, but most importantly, who's not. Representation matters. And so when you look around at your boardrooms, do you see women, immigrants, people of color, people living with disabilities? Are you representing the communities you're serving? And if not, I need you to interrogate why. And only when you're interrogating why can you use your privilege to bring more seats to the table to promote more inclusive environments moving forward. 2, signal boosting. In the early days of the Obama administration, the women of that administration noticed that their male colleagues were participating in mansplaining, talking over them, stealing their ideas. They banded together and began signal boosting each other's comments. I really like what Karen had to say, or I want to go back to Michelle's point. It's a simple action. But this practice does 3 things. It credits the original author of the idea, it keeps the idea on the table, and most importantly, it lets the other person know they have an ally in the room. It's not overstating it to say how significant that is. While we're talking about signal boosting, I want to reiterate the importance of signal boosting at the meeting. Because too often, there are these people that wait to the end of the meeting and they run up and like, Brenda, I loved what you said in there. It was so brave. Y'all laughing because y'all know what I'm talking about. Listen, while you may be certainly well-intentioned, I cannot tell you how frustrating it can be to be a person living on the margins who kind of mustered up the courage to say something that maybe you calculated and knew may be controversial. but you took that risk and said it anyway because it had to be said. You did it because it had to be said. I need you to speak up at the meeting, not after. Not after. Because the people who made that calculation and spoke up anyway are taking a risk that we need you to take. Use your privilege to co-sign at the meeting. Your public allyship and your visible solidarity speaks volumes. And finally, calling in. In this work, I emphasize the importance of calling in rather than calling out. As we have challenging conversations, it's important to approach people in a way where they can hear us. Sometimes you're the person doing the calling in. Sometimes you're being called in. That's how it goes. Whichever side you happen to be on, consider this an opportunity. You are being given a chance to do better and to be better. Treat what might otherwise be a correction as the gift that it is. The practices I gave you today, interrogating your surroundings, signal boosting, and calling in, are intended to affect change in your workplace. But let me be clear. Whether it's your boardroom or your classroom or your locker room or your dining room, we must show up, speak up, and stand up for each other. Let this be the beginning of a powerful opportunity to move beyond mere symbolism and move into greater inclusion through intersectional allyship together. Thank you.